Hello and welcome. This channel is about work, responsibility, and professional self-leadership for clarity and maturity. So let's talk about how work actually works. Today I want to speak directly to those of you who have just started your first serious job. Maybe you've just graduated, maybe you've been in your role for 3 months, or maybe 6 months, or even a year. And something feels overwhelming. Not dramatic, not catastrophic, but heavier than you expected. So let me say this first. If your first job feels overwhelming, that does not mean you are failing. It means you have entered reality, and reality is different from perception. When I started working, one of my earliest roles was in a sugar company. It was physically demanding, hot. My fingers hurt at the end of the day, really, really hurt. And it was not abstract, it was real. Later, when I entered my first graduate role in a multinational company, I expected a different kind of shock. And I experienced that kind of shock. The work was not physically painful, but it wasn't clear. Why? Well, things were not very organized, and it was a new setup. They were setting up a new department. Expectations were not always explicit. People assumed I understood things I had never been taught. And that was overwhelming in a different way. Not because I wasn't capable, but because capability and clarity are not the same thing. And no one tells you that before you start. So you don't really know. So here is what usually happens in a first job. You arrive with intelligence, qualifications, motivation, because you are motivated then. A desire to do well, because everybody wants to do well. And you think, if I work hard and I'm smart, I will be fine. But work is not only about effort and intelligence. Work is about understanding invisible standards, reading situations, interpretation of expectations, navigating ambiguity. And those things are rarely explained. So your brain is working overtime. You're trying to prove yourself, avoid mistakes, understand your manager, understand the team, your department where you're working, not look inexperienced, and keep up with your colleagues. That constant internal processing creates exhaustion. You get exhausted by it. Not because the job is impossible, but because your nervous system is in adaptation mode. So you're adapting to your new role, you're adapting to your first job. Many young professionals quietly think, you probably might be thinking about it, maybe I'm not good enough. That was a thought that I used to have. I thought that too many times. Even when I was progressing. In my graduate role, I moved from a commercial assistant role to an executive assistant within 3 months. Outwardly, that looks like confidence and competence. Internally, I still had moments of doubt, because progression does not remove overwhelm. Responsibility increases it. And when you are young in your career, responsibility feels exposed. So let me explain something important. Your first year at work is not just about learning tasks. It is about identity reorganization. Why? because you are shifting from what? Student to professional. And that is not small. It's a big gap there. You're a student, you're a professional. So here, first of all, you're a student, and then secondly, you're a professional. But you're transitioning from this stage and phase of your life, student to professional. As a student, expectations are structured, feedback is formalized, success is measurable, and you know what good looks like and how it feels. At work, expectations are fluid, they go up and down. Feedback is often indirect, standards are implied, and good is contextual. That shift destabilizes even very capable people, especially also, I would say, capable people, because capable people expect themselves to adapt quickly. You might think, oh, I can do this, I'll adapt. And when adaptation takes time, they judge themselves very harshly. Another layer of overwhelm comes from misinterpretation of the feedback given. So early on, feedback can feel like a verdict. You hear, this needs more clarity. And internally, you translate, I'm not good enough. But often, feedback in a workplace is not about your worth. So don't worry about that one. It's not about your worth. It is about alignment with a standard you have not yet internalized. And that takes time. Even very intelligent people misread this early. I did. But there is an important distinction. Overwhelm in your first job is not a signal to withdraw. So it's a signal that you are encountering real responsibility. You are facing that responsibility. And there are two paths at this stage. So the first path, pull back emotionally, do the minimum, blame the organization, stay confused. And then there's another path. You stay, observe, learn the pattern, ask better questions, strengthen your internal steadiness. Strengthen your internal steadiness. Neither path is dramatic, but over the years, they lead to very different outcomes, obviously. So something else no one explains. Your first job compresses growth. You're exposed to consequences, time pressure, hierarchy, because also hierarchy, politics, and real accountability. And that's all at once. Well, obviously, of course, it feels overwhelming, doesn't it? Your system, you inside of you, is absorbing more in 6 months than some people absorb in 3 years of education. So over time, if you stay steady, something changes. The same situations that once felt destabilizing become manageable. Meetings that once felt personal become informational. Predictable. Feedback that once felt personal becomes information. But that transition does not happen by accident. No, it doesn't. It happens through conscious engagement. Not perfection, not speed. We don't want to speed ourselves. Engagement. We are engaged into it. If you're in your first year right now and you feel slightly behind, slightly exposed, slightly uncertain, slightly tired, this is not a failure signal. It is a growth signal. But growth without clarity becomes self-doubt. And clarity without action becomes theory. So personal self-leadership begins exactly here. Not when you are a senior, not when you feel confident, but when you decide, I will understand this properly. So your first job feels overwhelming because you're entering invisible standards, you're reorganizing your identity, you're learning how work actually functions step by step, you are confronting responsibility for the first time. That is not weakness, that is development. So clarity is the beginning, practice is what makes and creates change. If you want to become a professional self-leader and join me in the mentorship, you will find the link below.